Good afternoon. Welcome back to Insured Families Fun Facts. Last week we went over farm and ranch. This week's going to be about farm and ranch endorsements with equine exposure. As we mentioned earlier, many types of farms out there, and today we're going to be going over equine. So if you've got a farm and ranch policy, most of the time insureds will assume that they are protected for equine activities or events, and that's not always the case. So let's go over a few of the endorsements that you can add to your policy and educate you some of those endorsements that you may need and liabilities that you face. So with farm and ranch on an equine exposure, obviously one of the biggest things is equine liability. Equine liability is going to be an endorsement that can be added to that farm and ranch policy that's going to protect you against events or accidents arising out of an equine activity, such as a trail ride or pleasure ride, or if someone else is on your property trying a horse, or if someone gets injured in your barn. That's going to be an equine liability endorsement that can be added to your policy. One thing to keep in mind with these endorsements, especially equine, is if you involve money into that farm and ranch or in your operation, then we're probably going to need endorsements to fully protect you. So keep that in mind. Selling horses, you're going to need an equine endorsement or equine liability endorsement to your policy in most cases. Now, they're going to want your farm and ranch policy with an equine endorsement is going to want some signed waiver, going to have some exclusions and limits of insurance, sublimits, and that type of thing. A lot of these endorsements, such as the equine liability, will help you with that. Our second one is probably our most common that we see. If you're training horses or if you're riding for someone else, you have their horse in your care, then that care, custody, and control, or CCC endorsement, is probably one of the largest gaps in a farm policy that we see when insureds come in with their policy for us to look over and to view it with them. CCC, if you have a horse that you have there that you're training for someone else, or they have their horse there in your care, then that's going to be where if that horse gets injured in the barn or gets sick or colics or injured in a turnout, injured in a paddock or pasture, or dies, then that would be where that CCC or care, custody, and control endorsement could really benefit you, as it would step forward and that would be where your coverage would apply there, not to your farm and ranch. So that's one of the largest gaps we see. If you are training for someone else, we try to advise our insureds, hey, even if you're taking one horse in, riding it for 2 weeks or for a month or whatever, something could happen to that horse. You guys, just like me, I'm sure you're aware, I've actually had a horse that I had in riding for a guy back years ago, and just putting out hay, the horse broke a leg and had to be put down. Unfortunately, those things happen. That's where these endorsements can really protect you, your farm, and your investment for your family and for yourself and generations to come. There's another endorsement as we're talking with the care, custody, and control that kind of ties in. It's professional trainer or instructor endorsement. What that endorsement's going to do, if you have clinic there that you're putting on, or you're giving riding lessons, that type thing, this is a very important endorsement to add to your policy to protect you. Unfortunately, the number one thing we see with this endorsement is, especially if you're giving riding lessons to youth, or if you're giving someone a riding lesson on their horse, you can be facing claims that would arise, such as neglect training, or we didn't have the proper safety equipment, we didn't give the proper training, safety training to this rider. Unfortunately, that's some of the things that you could see arise for that. This professional trainer or instructor endorsement would pick up in this situation. That would be where it would carry. So keep that in mind. So that kind of gets us through those three. If you're another endorsement that you can look at adding to your policy that's going to be above your farm and ranch policy would be boarding and stabling. Now, this endorsement, if someone is keeping their horse there overnight, it really sets up for multiple owners, multiple horses. even multiple locations, that endorsement can be added to your policy. And they're going to want to see when we request that endorsement, they're going to want to see us have a boarders agreement or a boarders lease agreement. And they're going to want us to have a signed waiver of subrogation from the person that is boarding there. So for those of you that board horses, outside horses in, I get it. It's a great way to help generate revenue for your farm and ranch. But keep in mind, every time we add something monetarily into that farm and ranch, we also create an exposure that we need to address to fully protect you in the instance that a claim should arise. Another endorsement that we see a lot of times, and I think people really overlook this endorsement, much like the CCC endorsement, would be the equine events. So if you've got an arena at your place, you have a barrel race, a team roping, a breakaway, a cutting, a reining, working cow horse. If that is an event, and even if it's not an event, you have an exposure there that someone could get hurt. Unfortunately, I have seen this happen in the past where someone gets hurt in an arena, happened to be at a practice. What this endorsement would do, it would cover someone there that's practicing or competing. Obviously, if they're competing, my advice there would be to, hey, get them to sign a waiver that you're not responsible. Most of your states are all going to have a little different law. No, here in our state, we have the equine law, so everybody's entering at their risk, but I still recommend to go out there and get them to sign that waiver when they sign up and pay their entry fees. That helps protect you. But also those spectators that are there that may get injured, those events are going to need to be covered. And this event will cover most of your small events that you're going to have on site or on premises. Now, if you're doing an off premises deal, sometimes we can carry that endorsement over. And depending on the size of event, we may need to do an event policy for that specific event. We certainly can do that. We'll get into that in some other segments and sections. But that's one thing to keep in mind. If you're having something there, an event, whether it be barrel race, team roping, or whatever, you have an exposure there that's going to be outside of that base farm and ranch policy. So we're going to need to look at an endorsement there to pick coverage up to fully protect you in that case. Another one that a lot of people are not aware of, tack and mobile equipment. You can add an endorsement there. This endorsement is going to be to cover, obviously, your tack. A lot of times these saddles and tack in today's, even bits in today's time are quite expensive, and you can get tens of thousands of dollars tied up fast and in a hurry. So we can add those endorsements to it that would follow your saddles and tack to off-premises locations. Doesn't just cover it on your farm in particular. So keep that in mind. We can add that in there, and it is relatively inexpensive. Off-premises transport is another endorsement that can be added to an equine farm policy. Off-premises is pretty much going to cover things like loading and unloading. It's going to cover transport. You have a separate transport endorsement that can also be added that would cover transporting someone else's horse. In other words, example, I pick up a buddy, we're headed to the rodeo, I have my horse insured, I'm good, they don't have their horse insured. If I have that transport, and you're going to want that value to be enough to cover, that transport limit to be enough to cover how many ever horses you might put in there that you don't own. But that is, with most carriers, is an endorsement that you can add that would pick up and give some coverage there for a non-owned horse. Now, your horses, if they're not insured on an equine mortality policy, your horses in transport or your cattle in transport, in most instances, would be covered under that base farm and ranch policy. So just to clarify a little bit about the transport there. Another one we can look at is on the liability side. If you've got your horse, you're taking your horse to a barrel race, you're taking your horse to a team roping, a cutting, reining, breakaway, whatever it may be, then if we don't have at least the equine liability endorsement, then we are looking at some gaps in coverages that could exist there. Now, will there be coverages? Again, I'm not an adjuster. I can't tell you definitively, but I do know the sublimits are a lot smaller. So your horse kicks somebody at an event, if your horse runs over a vehicle, which I've had happen, step back and back into a vehicle, those equine liabilities and some of these endorsements that we can add ensures that we're covered, and it closes or fills the gaps in that typical base farm and ranch policy. So in closing with it, equine farm and ranch is a whole different animal than just a farm and ranch policy that would be, say, for a hobby. Now, if your horses are straight personal use, you're using them on your farm, you're not taking them off your farm, you're checking your cattle with your horses, your base farm and ranch policy is gonna have enough coverages there for you in most instances. However, if we're competing, or if we are selling horses, or if we are training for others, or we have others' horses boarded or in our care, custody, and control, then that base farm policy is just going to have too many gaps to get you fully covered. So what you would need there is to look at some of these endorsements, give us a call. I'll be glad to go over them with you on one basis. No farm that you go through is going to be the same exposures with coverage, and that stays true to equine. Equine farms are all going to be different from one farm to the next. So if you'll give us a call, we'll be glad to go over all of your particular exposures, advise what we would look at as far as endorsements to fully cover you. And then at the end of the day, we'll come up with the best package that best suits your individual needs. So I hope these videos are helping. We're trying to help educate you. The first step to knowing if you're fully covered or if you have gaps is actually just having knowledge of what endorsements are out there. And that's what we're trying to do for you guys to help you out. Hey, if you've enjoyed these videos, hit that like, that share, and that follow. Let's get this out there to all of our equine friends and family. And let's try to make this something that can be beneficial to each and every one of us. Again, thank you for watching, and thank you for being a part of our insured family.